What's your true life story that nobody will believe? Just after I turned 19, I was arrested and charged for an armed robbery I was completely innocent of. I spent 10 months in jail, 6 of which I spent in solitary confinement on suicide watch. I spent my birthday at a resort hotel with my girlfriend at the time. That night, at around 3 a.m., the front desk was robbed by 2 people, one with a gun and one with a knife. We were questioned when we left the hotel at 11 a.m., since we roughly matched a height/weight description of the masked robbers. Later that day, it was discovered that my girlfriend had used a bad credit card to pay for the room, unbeknownst to me, and we were both publicly arrested on a sidewalk and taken to the state police barracks in handcuffs, without a word on what we were being charged with. We were taken to separate rooms and questioned for hours on end about the robbery, the same questions over and over again. She ended up going to jail for the credit card and I was released, but told to return the next day for further questioning. I did, and was taken to a back room, sat in a corner, and had 2 detectives relentlessly question me, picking apart everything I was saying, looking for any circumstantial evidence that could connect me to the crime, and suggesting to me that my girlfriend had robbed the place and I was going down with her if I didn't give them information. Being 19, I had no idea what to do and believed what they were telling me. I didn't question the falsified information they presented to me, and I was brought several times to the brink of giving a confession after being threatened with 10 years upstate if I didn't cooperate. 10 days later, 2 officers showed up at my door and arrested me for armed robbery. My girlfriend was coerced into giving a confession implicating me as an accomplice. I was placed immediately into solitary on 24-hour suicide watch and anxiously waited for a public defender. A week later, she showed up, and I told her I was totally innocent. She rolled her eyes and said, "Are you kidding me?" I burst into tears, my last hope of release being dashed, and she realized I was telling the truth. She said there's no defense against my girlfriend's confession, and I sank into such a deep depression coupled with shock that I had a psychotic break a few months into my stay. 90 days in solitary at 19, with no hope of proving your innocence will do that. The district attorney made periodic visits to me, offering 2 to 5 year deals for a confession and 10 years if I fought the charges, but I told him I would not admit to something I didn't do. Fast forward to 6 months after my arrest, all spent in solitary. I was woken and driven hurriedly early one morning to the state police barracks, where the DA met with me in a back room and said, "We have determined through further investigation that you were not at the scene of the crime." I was bursting with anger inside and said, "So you'll be releasing me today and dropping all charges, correct?" He got nervous and said, "No, we can't let you go without charges because it would look very bad on us. But I'll tell you what, we'll drop all the charges and give you a charge of interfering with the investigation. You'll be out in less than 6 months." I told him to get my lawyer there. I had a fairly heated exchange, my first real emotions I had felt other than despair in half a year, and agreed. I plead guilty to aiding and abetting the consummation of a crime after the fact and ended up doing 10 months total. A few months after my release, my girlfriend was released, and we tried piecing together what happened. Out of nowhere, the mother of the man who planned and committed the robbery found us and told us in person that her son admitted to her that he robbed the place with a close friend of his. He had been fired from the resort 3 days earlier and needed money to support his drug habit. He knew what day would profit most, where the money was, and how to easily get it, as well as how to bypass all form of security. She went to the police and they turned her away, saying they already had the people who did it and they didn't want to hear it. We tried hard to find a lawyer to take our case, but were never successful. This DA was later investigated for intimidation and abuse of power in a separate case, and to this day that is my only sense of justice in this situation. I was in Mexico way past my visa allowance, was only allowed 90 days, but was there for about 6 months at the time of this story. I was driving and passed a police car going too fast, so I got pulled over. I should mention I was also illegally working in Mexico at the time as well, and had my uniform and stuff in my trunk. As I'm pulled over and doing the whole license registration thing, the cops asked me for my visa. I told them it was at my house, which was not too far away, and if they would allow me to go get it. At this point, I just wanted to be alone for a second so I could make some calls and find out what to do. They asked me if they let me get it, would it even be valid? Not wanting to lie and fuck myself over more, I told them no, it was expired, and asked them what now. They started explaining to me that they would have to take me to jail and then deported. At this point, I am talking to one officer while the other is searching my car and finds my uniform. They asked me if I'm working in Mexico as well. At this point, they are getting angry and start making vague threats about how I will be getting the same treatment Mexicans get when they are in the US working illegally and get caught. At this point, I realized they didn't realize my license was a Canadian license and that I was Canadian. I told them this, and instantly the situation completely changed. Now they don't care about the visa and are asking me tons of questions about Canada. Is it cold all year? Do bears wander the streets of Toronto, etc.? We talked for quite a while, and they seemed really interested in Canada and were really friendly with me when they realized I wasn't American. So when I calmed down a bit after talking with them, I figured, might as well ask again what they want to do about the visa situation. They seemed apologetic and said unfortunately they already called it in, so they have to bring me to the station. As I am ready to start going with them, they get the radio in their cruiser, so one goes to answer it. He comes running back to my car and tells me to quickly get in my car and follow them down the road and don't even think about trying to get away from them. At this point, I have no idea what the fuck is going on, but I just do what he says and get in my car and follow them as they start speeding away, 100 plus in a 60. About 2 minutes down the road, a car bomb had gone off near a restaurant and injured, maybe killed, I never found out, a bunch of people. We pull up to the smoldering car and the cops get out and tell me to wait in my car. As I wait in my car, they go and do their cop thing. After about 20 minutes, one of the officers comes up to my car, hands me my license, tells me to go home and not get caught again and get back to Canada ASAP. I stayed in Mexico another 8 months before I went back. My cousin and I, both males, were about 12 years old, and as most 12-year-old boys liked to do, we were climbing things. We decided to climb onto the roof of a house and everything went smooth. We got up and hung out and talked about how awesome we were for conquering this mountain of house. Well, we go to get down and we have to drop down and hang and get our feet on a railing on the back porch. My cousin goes first and he gets down no problem, exactly as planned, so I was feeling confident as ever. I scoot to the side of the house and grab the roof and drop down and hang. Well, my grip wasn't what I thought it was and I lost hold of the house and, just like in the movies, landed with one leg on each side of the rail. I just rolled off to my right so that I would land on the deck and could cry in the fetal position. But I didn't realize the grill was right there, so I hit my head on the grill on the way down. I had to go to the hospital because my sack was black and blue, and a nice young nurse got to scan my balls to make sure there was no serious damage. Luckily, there were no lasting effects, and I can look back on it and laugh now. I used to live in Southwest Florida, and I loved to go fishing. I always went to this one pier that extended about 100 yards into the bay near my house. There were some people there fishing as well. They were there when I arrived. Through conversation while we watched our lines, I learned they had lost an unintended rod over the railing earlier. So there I am casting for, I think it was the third time, reeled in a bit, and that's when I felt something tug. Thinking I just made the fastest catch ever, I brought it in and shit was it hard. I thought my line was going to snap for sure. It didn't though, and when I brought that missing fishing pole out of the water, I nearly pissed myself, I was laughing so hard. So I get it up to the pier, the other people fishing are thanking me and laughing when I realize there's still tension on the line of the pole I pulled out of the ocean. So naturally, I start reeling. This was different from before. There was something alive on the end of it, no doubt. So again, I reel and I shut you not, I pull a 2 feet wide stingray out of the water. Nobody will believe me even when I show them the picture of the stingray on the pier, and it seriously pisses me off. When I was 4, 1992 to 1993, my mom, dad, sister, brother, and I were on our way back from South Dakota. We couldn't find a hotel the night before, so we slept in our Aerostar minivan. My parents did not get a ton of sleep because of this, and so the next day my mom was driving on the interstate and began to fall asleep at the wheel. She crossed over the rumble strips to the left of the road, woke up and overcompensated to the right, and the minivan turned sideways and began to flip and roll at 65 miles per hour. Right before this happened, my siblings and I had gotten permission to switch seats so my dad could read to me from the passenger seat while I sat in the middle row behind him, and we had all not yet buckled up again. During the flipping and rolling, the back seat ended up flying out the back of the van, somehow with my brother and sister going with it. I remember things leading up to this, but don't remember anything during the crash. Apparently, I somehow fell into my dad's lap in the front passenger seat, where he held me until the van came to a stop. The van stopped upside down on the road. Both my parents were still buckled in, and my dad was holding me while he was upside down. He unbuckled his seatbelt and got out of the van and left me with the women that had stopped to help. He then went back to the van to get my mom, who was still buckled in. She is paraplegic, so she needed help out. He looked for my brother and sister while helping her, but they were nowhere to be found. He got my mom out of the van and was helping her off the road when she looked around and didn't see my brother or sister. She began to freak out and asked, "Where are they?" At that moment, my dad looked down the road to see my brother and sister walking towards us. They had landed on the side of the road. My brother had just a scrape on his nose and some bruises as he landed in the grass. My sister was not so lucky. She landed on the road and got some major road rash on her arm and shoulder. She was also apparently the one to go through the glass, as she had lots of glass in her wounds. My mom, my dad, and I escaped with some minor scrapes and bruises. We were all rushed to the hospital, and everyone turned out okay. My sister got the worst of it, and I can still remember her screaming as they pulled the glass out of her wounds. She also had to have surgery on her arm as a few tendons in her wrist were torn. Overall, we were all extremely lucky to survive. We speculate that if my brother and sister had been in their seatbelts, it may have actually been worse, since they would have been strapped to the rear seat that went flying out the back. I've told this story to friends and had to have my parents confirm it, and have my sister show them the scars to get them to believe me.